sorry, Leith?
Have you passed the screen?
I haven't. No, I haven't yet.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Yeah, I will do that right away. So before I pass the presenter role to Leith, Leith, if anybody knocks, I won't see that. But if they knock, would you please allow them in?
Oh, certainly.
Yep.
And how do I do that?
You just have to, a box will pop up on your screen, a window will open on your screen, and all you have to do is click on allow.
Okay, and will you see that they've now come in?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'd like to introduce Leith. Leith is a PhD sports psych consultant. Actually, Leith told me yesterday you did your thesis on emotional intelligence in sports. So this is a specialty of yours. Leith is a learning facilitator with the Canadian Sports Institute in Ontario. Leith was a mentor coach for me, and as well Martin Kavanaugh, who's on the call. Leith mentored us through our level 4 diploma. Leith brings just so much experience at national and international level, so we're really pleased that Leith was willing to share her time with us. So I'm going to pass the presenter role to you, Leith, if you will accept it. And we have your screen. We can see your screen, so that's perfect.
Let's see. Sorry about my screen. That's what I want you to see.
Yay! Perfect.
Can everybody see that?
I can.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Thank you, Andrea, very much for that lovely introduction. And Andrea sort of understated it. This is my very most favorite topic. It was my dissertation topic, but it's one that I'm very favorite of. So I was thrilled to find that there's going to be a possibility to do a webinar with curling coaches on this topic. And I hope we have some great discussion along the way, because I'm very convinced that it's important for coaching and leadership. But I really want to hear your experiences and whether you would support this or have different ideas or whatever. So the topic is emotional intelligence for coaching and leadership. And I think coaching and leadership are completely transferable words. I think all coaches are leaders, and the way leadership is changing, all leaders need to be coaches. So it's very much in keeping. So you can see 3 pictures on your screen, and they're all very dramatic images of bridges. And I always like to pick the theme for my presentations, something that's very much a metaphor for the topic. And I thought bridges, connection, joining things together, spanning difficult waters or whatever is very, very in keeping with the idea of emotional intelligence and the value and the importance of emotional intelligence in coaching and leadership. So you're going to see these images of the bridges as we go through the presentation. So what we're going to do today is have a brief introduction, and then I want to dive right into the idea of emotional intelligence in a very logical sequence of why we're even talking about it, what it is, how can we break it down so that we can kind of understand it in a way that we can apply it to what we're doing. And then last, but certainly not least, how does one acquire emotional intelligence? emotional intelligence is a skill. So just as a brief introduction, Andrea said that my PhD was about emotional intelligence, but the intro to the PhD was really 5 years of intense triathlon training with the goal of winning a world championship, which I, with great joy and pride, did. And on reflecting from that experience, as you can see, it was in the 90s, so I was in my 50s when I did it. I really thought, why did I get so engaged and so passionate about this particular challenge? And what did I learn? And what I really came out of it was being very, very interested in the whole issue of performance and coaching and mental skills to give your best performance, to give your performance on demand. So that was what led to my PhD. So even my PhD was very late in my life, but very much in keeping and on a topic that I became completely passionate about. However, so here is just a nice overview, a definition, a layman person's definition of emotional intelligence, which you also see frequently just as EI. Emotional intelligence is a skill that gives one the ability to be comfortable in one's skin, to be able to connect and build relationships with other people, and to skillfully navigate one's environment. So we're going to break all those sections down in the seminar tonight, but there's a couple of pieces in this definition that I think are really worth looking at for a minute. The first word is skill. Emotional intelligence is not an inherited trait like a reflex. It's not something that some people have and other people don't. It's definitely a learnable skill. Like any other skill, whether it's throwing a rock or sweeping or understanding the strategies of curling, some people have more natural ability in emotional intelligence too. They might just naturally be more empathetic. They might naturally be more self-reflective or self-managing better, but that's like talent and at any other activity. That's the starting point. We all grow from there, and to be really good at it or to have your ability expands with the amount of time that you spend working on it. So you can see here it's comfortable with oneself, ability to connect and build relationships, and the ability to cope with your environment. And you can see the reason that this is so valuable for coaching and leadership is those three things: self-comfort, connectability, and managing stress and being adaptive in completely unpredictable circumstances are certainly something that I'm sure you coaches would understand and experience weekly, if not daily. So this is not a new idea. Calling it emotional intelligence is probably a new idea, but I want to take you back to 1936 when Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that book has sold over 15 million copies. It's still available today, and it's still a very popular book. And at the time, in the late 30s, it was on the bestseller list for 3 years. But I think it's interesting to look, in hindsight, what making friends, winning friends, and influencing people meant in 1936. So words like handling people, fundamental techniques in handling people, or making people like you, win people to your way of thinking, change people without giving them offense or arousing resentment, producing miraculous results. And I love the 7th, making your home life happier. So you can see a very different narrative just coming out of the major sections in the book. Like I think, find this way of considering relationships or working with people or influencing kind of not what we want to do or think about anymore. But certainly in 1936, people were thinking about emotional intelligence and just using it in a completely different way. So starting out with the why of emotional intelligence, because it helps us be more comfortable with ourselves, it helps us build relationships and connect with other people, and it helps us navigate our environment, we can see that there are some extremely valuable reasons that this might be important. So the first one that I've just put down here is building and maintaining relationships. Coaching and leadership, influencing and inspiring are about building relationships. Leadership and coaching is no longer about command and control. It's not my way or the highway. It's how do I bring the best out of the people who are working with me or I'm responsible for or that I'm have the privilege of being part of their development. So exercising influence, not command and control, but being able to influence in a positive way, in a way that gets people performing or achieving goals that they might not even believe they're capable of until they start in a strong relationship with a coach or a leader that sets this direction. Inspiring bold performance. This is the next step. This is when it's not only about achieving goals, but it's really about performing and it's really about boldness. And I think emotional intelligence is hugely important with our athletes and with people who we're working with or in relationships with, to give them the confidence and give them the self-belief that they're really capable of it. And that's where the inspiration comes in. And the fourth one here is the learned skill. I can't overemphasize how important this is. There are definitely ways in which we acquire and improve this skill of emotional intelligence. So I told Andrea that I was going to kind of pose some questions for you as the group about, as we come to the natural breaks, about different types of emotional intelligence. So my question to you, and if you have any questions at this point, I would be really pleased to take them. But my question to you is, looking at the why, from your coaching experience, what are some of the other reasons that you might have experienced or thought about as you're coaching, which would make these pieces of emotional intelligence important and valuable as a coach? Anybody having some brain waves at the moment?
Hi, Leith. It's Martin Kavanagh.
Hi, Martin. Nice to hear your voice.
Thank you, and likewise. It's an unmitigated pleasure to be able to speak with you again. It's been a few years,
lovely.
And
Thank
by the
you.
way, our friend Dan Hadley from Alpine Ski sends his best.
Is what?
He sends his best, Dan
Oh,
Hadley from
thank
Alpine
you.
Ski. Yes.
Oh, you've
so
made
back
my
on
night.
topic. Yeah, well, Dan's doing great, by the way. So on topic, I'm so happy to be able to dialogue with you again. It's been a while. Emotional intelligence. So, from my perspective, it's leading change. Leith is sometimes a rocky road, both internally and externally.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence, it's in my coaching profile and what I've been exercising since being helped so much from you and Beth McCharles at CSIO, is being able to communicate. I use it as a form of communication. It's neither nonverbal or verbal. It's somewhere in between. It's that intuition or a way of communicating with the athletes and establishing that buy-in. It's that I don't know. It's like another form of energy that is used for communication in my programs.
Oh, and, fabulous!
And I use it as a tool, and I'm ever so trying to perfect the skills and the art of it. But to get the buy-in, to know that I'm connected in some way, more than just the verbal or the physical contact of having them in proximity. I need to get the buy-in, and I use that emotional connection to do so. So that's just my input, and I'm going to try I'm going to try and come in and dialogue as much as I can. I do have a coaching session, so I am listening. But I'll try and chirp in whenever I can. But thanks so much for taking on this seminar tonight, Leith.
My pleasure. And I think you brought up a couple of interesting ideas there. Change. What coach is not having to? Oh, Andrea.
Yes.
Sean would like to join, but I can't see my cursor.
Oh.
Should I?
Okay, I'm gonna reclaim the presenter role. I'll let him in, and then I'll give it back to you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right, now I'll give it back to you. And you'll have to accept it again, Leith. Oh, I hope I find your cursor.
Okay,
you might have to. We got it.
Okay, perfect. I'll go back to.
Yeah.
So Martin mentioned the word change, and I don't think anybody, especially coaches, who are always helping athletes improve their performance and seeing change happen, could be something that is just so much easier, both for the person who has to change, but also the change agent, when there's emotional intelligence involved. It just improves communication, it improves connection, it improves support, it improves caring, the sense of caring. Absolutely. And that I'm going to put another bullet in here about change, because I think that's such an important thing. Was there anybody else who'd like to jump in here, or should we move on?
Well, I just had an observation, because when I was the executive director of a women's shelter, so it's not sport related, but it is. I mean, it transfers.
It's sure about performance.
And getting the best out of people, because if you went in as sort of the boss, it was very difficult to have people buy in, and the women that I was working with at the time had been through trauma in getting into these work positions. So it was very interesting, because you've got all these voices on the sidelines saying, just tell them what to do, just put your foot down, kind of thing. And there are times for that, but there are times when you need to exactly what this emotional intelligence says. Not to say that I have that, but it worked better.
Yes, absolutely. And the whole idea of buy-in, for people to be able to buy in they really have to have a sense of confidence and self-respect and willingness to take on a challenge and a responsibility. So you really can't just tell people to do that. You really have to connect with people and build a relationship and allow them to experience that sense of confidence and self-respect that they can then buy in. But boy, I can tell you, my experience with working with athletes and with people, unless you get buy-in, change is not really going to happen. It's only going to happen until you hit the first roadblock, and then you're right back where you started.
Yeah.
So taking the time to get that buy-in and doing it with emotional intelligence is just key.
Couple of comments. That when there is emotional intelligence as the influence, and it's creating or leading people to change, it's palpable, hard for me to say, but it also must be done with sincerity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very important. Yeah, and we're gonna revisit that idea when we look into how do you acquire this.
Perfect.
That's such an important point. Very, very clear. We okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Then I'd like to move on to the what. So we've looked at the why. We've had a brief discussion on sort of why this might be important. So now we want to try and really deconstruct it a little more specifically and a little more detail than what we had in our initial definition, and really understand what it is before we look into it. Okay, if that's what it is, now I know much more easily how I'm going to acquire that. So emotional intelligence, or EI, is all about relationships. And there are 3 different levels. Oh, Jason Rice would like to join.
Okay.
I can do this. If I escape, allow, and then go back.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Good? Okay.
Yep, that's good. Yep.
Is he in?
Let me look. I think so.
Good. Okay. Hi, Jason.
Yep, Jason's here.
Okay. So there are 3 levels of these relationships. And the first one, as it said in the definition, being comfortable with yourself. So this is the intrapersonal relationship with yourself. The second one, being able to connect and build relationships with people, that is the interpersonal relationship with others. And the third one, being able to successfully and effectively navigate your environment, is the relationship, the environmental relationship with any given changing, unpredictable situation. So we're going to look at each of these relationships individually and to see what they are more clearly before we look into, okay, how am I going to develop these different levels of relationship? So the first one, the intrapersonal comfort with yourself. I think there's a quote from Socrates several thousand years ago about know thyself. This is the fundamental, foundational starting place. Self-knowledge. And from self-knowledge comes self-mastery. So the intrapersonal level, the relationship with yourself, has 2 skills. The skill to build ever-increasing knowledge about yourself, your needs, your reactions, your fundamental value system, and then your ability, knowing all that, to be able to manage those reactions and manage your responses so that they're the most appropriate for whatever individual, whatever situation you're dealing with. So if you look at this cartoon here, I think this is where a lot of us start. I want greater self-awareness, but can I continue to be unaware of my bad qualities? So I think one of the things about self-knowledge is, and frequently I find with athletes, they can tell you all the things that they don't do well, or they're much more willing to start with, oh, I don't do this, and I might be able to do this. And we want them to be very aware of that, but we want them to be even more aware and excited about all their strengths. So that's the first relationship with self. Here's a Carl Jung quote, beautiful bridge span. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So I have found that to be incredibly true. Sometimes it's way easier to start with a little self-reflection by getting annoyed about some other irritation. And if I just take the time to say, okay, I know this is all about them, but what do I find out about myself from experiencing this irritation? So the second level of relationship is your relationship with others, the intrapersonal. And there are three pieces to this: trust, credibility, and there is authenticity. And I was so glad that one of our participants mentioned sincerity as a really important comment, because this is absolutely it. Without sincerity and without authenticity, other people find it very difficult to trust, and it can very much undermine credibility. So we want to be thinking about, in my relationships, am I trusting of others, and am I trustworthy? Am I building credibility? And are there things that I do which put my credibility at risk? As we all know, credibility is such a fragile piece of crystal. It's very, very hard to build, and it can be shattered extremely quickly. And then the authenticity. And the third one is environmental. And this is the relationship to to the situation. So to be able to build relationships that are effective and that help you navigate unpredictable, difficult situations, you really want to be very adaptable. You want to be flexible. And certainly as a coach, working in sometimes extremely high-pressured situations with people who are experiencing stress themselves, being able to manage stress and manage it in a way that's not completely debilitating or is not transmitting stress or anxiety to others is very, very valuable. I can remember I once was working with a women's hockey team, and the coach was an extremely good, very, very intense coach. But one of the things that she and I worked on a lot, and that she became very aware of, was how her anxiety was transferred to the players, and how the players might not be experiencing the stress that she was experiencing, and usually her stress was sort of triggered by the referees. It wasn't being triggered by, losing, or even her players making mistakes or whatever. Her stress was way more triggered by what she was considering poor refereeing. But the minute she got going, the whole team just went into anxiety mode, and their whole performance just collapsed. So stress management from the point of view of just your own self-preservation is important. But as coaches, And as parents, we know how people who are looking up to us for leadership can be extremely affected by our reactions. So here's what Darwin had to say about adaptability. It's not the strongest or the fittest, which is what we sometimes say, the fittest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive or adaptable to change. And he certainly saw that when he was doing his research in the 1800s with the finch and people like that, that the birds that had really survived in the Galapagos on those very, very uninhabited, harsh islands were the ones who physically adapted to the environment. So those are the three whats of emotional intelligence, the three levels of relationship: intrapersonal, interpersonal, and environmental. So, and I should say to you that this particular model, and this is the model that I used in my PhD thesis, and it was developed by a psychologist called Reuven Ber-On, who was an Israeli teaching at the university in Tel Aviv, and he became very interested in emotional intelligence, and he sort of broke it down into these three levels of relationships to really be able to create a survey and a questionnaire that he could then give to people to get a self-report on how they saw or how they perceived their own emotional intelligence. So when I was telling Andrea that when I was doing my research and I talked to coaches about how they thought that their emotional intelligence influenced their coaching process, this was in the early 2000s, and they really weren't sure what I was talking about. Like, they didn't exactly know what I meant by emotional intelligence. But then when I broke it down into these three levels and said, well, one level is, how well you know yourself and manage yourself, and another level is how well you connect with people and can help your athletes perform their best. And the third level is how adaptable you are in situations and how flexible and how well you manage stress. Oh, that's emotional intelligence? Well, then I can tell you all about that. So that was very interesting to me. So I have another question to pose to you here. Now that you see those three levels, or I'm sure that some of you also have done some other reading and some other work in emotional intelligence, my question would be, are there any other models or theories that you're familiar with or that you use that you find also a helpful way to think about what emotional intelligence is?
Martin is asking.
Yeah.
Martin is asking, is this similar to the 360-degree reflection model?
Well, yes and no. The 360-degree model is other people giving their perception of your skill. Mm-hmm. So in this, if in Ber-On's questionnaire, his questionnaire was for the individuals to assess themselves, but it also was adaptable to a 360 where the coach could give the same questionnaire to his athletes or his fellow coaches and say, I want to know your opinion or your perceptions about how well I manage stress, or how well I know myself, or how flexible I am, or that kind of thing. So it's this particular questionnaire lends itself, and actually in my thesis, I gave the survey to 60 international Canadian coaches, but I interviewed eight of them. And of those 8, I had their athletes, 3 randomly chosen athletes, do 360 on their coach. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Good.
With regard to stress management,
Yeah.
I subscribe to the duck theory, or at least I try.
Right.
Be like a duck, paddling like crazy below the surface, but sailing along smoothly on the surface.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
you have to act. At times, yes. You have to act.
Yes.
In order not to transfer that anxiety to the very people that don't need it.
Right. And who are extremely susceptible to picking up on it.
Yeah.
If they happen to see that, get a glimpse of what's going on under the water.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that analogy. It's absolutely perfect. And I wish I'd had that to talk to the hockey coach with. You totally see what, that there's an image of what you're trying to do. Appear totally calm, even though your heart rate might be at 180.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sweaty palms, whatever, but you look like you've just gotten out of bed.
Exactly. Are there any other questions or comments or answers to Leith's question?
Okay. I'm going to move on to our third level. Not our third level. We did our third level. That's environmental. So now I'm going to move into the meat of how to acquire emotional intelligence. And most of my examples here are about coaching, because it's things that I've used in my own coaching practice. But at the intrapersonal level, what we're looking for is self-knowledge and self-management. So the thing that you're asking yourself is, who am I? Do I really know myself well? Can I predict how I'm going to react? Do I like myself? Do I respect myself? Do I act in a way of self-respect? Then what do I stand for? What are my values? Then what are my goals? What are my dreams? What am I really planning for myself in whatever endeavors I'm taking on, whether it's my coaching? What are my coaching goals for myself, not for my athletes, for myself? What are my dreams about how far I'm going to, what I'm going to achieve as a coach? Whatever level I choose to be, whatever level my athletes are working at, what's my dream of how I can really make the biggest contribution as a coach? So those are the kinds of questions you ask yourself to get a better understanding of your self-knowledge, and then the evidence. And this is both for yourself, but also if you want to inspire and share with others. First of all, just your coaching philosophy, written for yourself. What are the values and the beliefs behind my coaching practice? What's important to me to be modeling every day and to be fully evident in all my coaching sessions? So that should be written down, and it takes some sessions and it takes some thinking to get it written down and to really have a document. And then whether you choose to share it or not, the really important learning part of it is to get it written down and to massage it and to use it for yourself. But Martin will have heard this, but it was very interesting because in the level 4, the advanced coaching diploma at the CSIO now, in the leadership course, one of the first things that the coaches have to do is create their own personal coaching philosophy. And one of the coaches told us that he really hadn't thought about this, but he got it done. And then he told us after he had got it done and he'd been in the course for a year, he went for an interview with some national sport organization, and they were looking for a head coach for one of their very elite teams. And the very first thing they asked him was, could he talk about his coaching philosophy? And this coach said he was quite shocked because he'd never heard that question before. And he was so relieved that he had put a lot of time and effort into getting something that he was really comfortable and completely fluent and very committed and passionate about, because when he said it, it sounded extremely authentic and was very inspirational. So that's the coaching philosophy. Then the next thing is the vision statement. Now, the vision statement is about your dreams. And so this would be about what's your dream about where your coaching is going to go. And it doesn't necessarily, you're not trying to answer the question of what's your action plan of how you're going to get there. You're really dreaming here. You're doing a Jack Kennedy, we're going to put a man on the moon type of idea. And then you look at, once you've kind of got that dream and, oh my goodness, just even thinking about that makes me excited. Then you think about, okay, why is that important to me? And you flesh this out a little bit more in your vision. And then you say to yourself, is there anybody else who's going to benefit from this besides me? Because we found that our dreams are much more likely to come true and actually much more inspiring to us as individuals if we discover that actually there's other people who are also going to be inspired and brought along and engaging in this process. And Kennedy certainly found that in his man on the moon dream. And then the fourth part of the vision is, okay, so this is my dream. This is why it's important to me. These are all the other people who are going to be engaged and inspired by this. I need to just sit back and think to myself, so what are the strengths? What are the assets, the personal characteristics that I have that really are going to make this possible? What are all the resources that I have personally and can access that are really going to make this dream come true? I don't know how, but I just know that with these strengths that I have, my determination, my persistence, my resilience, my positivity, and all these other things, this is a really worth working for. It's going to have downs, it's going to have ups, but it's worth giving it my all. Then there's the continuous, as you create your plan to achieve this dream, the self-reflection. The sitting back and saying, okay, this is what I wanted to do. Did I get it done? What did I learn from this? So that as you go along, the journey gets richer and richer. Not because you eventually get to the goal, but because when you get to the goal and you look back on it, you say to yourself, oh my goodness, that journey was really the meat in this experience. And then the other evidence is the curiosity, not the judgment, not the constantly evaluating. It's the curiosity, it's the wonder, it's the acceptance, it's the ability to look at things and find new information, to be self-critical in a very positive way, that you're getting information that's going to help you improve the plan, improve the journey. So that's all part of self-knowledge and self-management, the intrapersonal relationship. The next one is, okay, how do I acquire interpersonal relationships? So the goal of connecting and building interpersonal relationships is to really care, to care about the person, to care about the relationship, to care about the connection, to inspire yourself in building this relationship and inspire the other. So both parties are feeling like there's a very mutual benefit and enjoyment in this, and a common goal to connect, to share yourself, to develop others, and to empower others. So the first three are really about making that connection, about making sure that there's a very solid bond there, that the development and the empowering and the going forward, the challenges are going to be not easy, but more fun and much more likely to be successful. So to build and maintain and benefit from the intrapersonal relationships, what kind of behaviors do we want to be seeing? The first one goes right back to the original comment, sincerity. Be yourself. You're the only person in this world who hasn't been taken yet. Other people have themselves, but you are only you. So be yourself. Be trustworthy. All about credibility and trust. Be empathetic. Understand. Take time to understand and to feel and to care where the other person is coming from. And take time to understand and to care and to feel where you're coming from. Benefit from that little irritation. Benefit from that tremendous joy and sense of accomplishment. Listen attentively. So I think more and more coaching is talking about listening. And I don't know if you've all heard this, but somebody said the other day, which I hadn't heard before and I thought was just perfect. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we should be using them in a 2-to-1 ratio. So we're listening twice as much as we're speaking. And I think that's maybe an excellent ratio, and even the listening could be a little bit more. And I think that this is even becomes more and more important as you want to get that buy-in that Andrea talked about. It's all about the listening and getting those important questions, getting those really timely, deep, intuitive questions from attentive listening. And then the last one in building relationships, and this is also about being trustful and trusting others, is delegate. Build other people up by believing in them and by giving them a chance to see how fabulous they are. And the last one is our environmental relationship. So the goal is being adaptable, being able to change, being able to be aware of what the situation requires and change in an appropriate way to be effective. Being flexible. Flexible doesn't mean falling over. Flexible means, an even better word than flexible is agile. So you all know what agility in a physical sense means. Being emotionally and mentally agile is the same thing. It's being extremely sensitive to the external environment and reacting to it in a very appropriate, balanced way. And then the third one is the stress management. We talked a little bit about that. The duck, I love it. Appearing completely calm, unfazed, and working like the devil beneath the water. So what kind of behaviors would you see in this, someone who is really navigating the environment well and being effective? First one you'd see is a relentless learner, somebody whose curiosity is just off the charts. And with the relentless learner comes the continuous improver. So it's being very joyful about achievements, but not being self-satisfied to the extent that you don't push on. And kind of be curious about this. This feels terrific. This feels really good. I'm sort of wondering, what else is out there? What's around the next corner? Being a problem solver. Being able to look at situations, measure them up, evaluate them, assess them, and then come up with a solution. Not just a problem identifier. That is sometimes the easiest piece. But being able to identify the problem and then come up with, in a flexible, adaptable, consultative way, some possible solutions or options for moving forward is really important in effective environmental relationships. And then, again, in coaching and in leadership, we have to be change agents. But this means we not only have to be looking for change and expecting change and inspiring change in others, we have to be changing ourselves. We have to be equally as accountable to be changing ourselves and looking for new ways of doing things and improving and building as we are with the people we're working with. So those are the behaviors and those are the goals of effective environmental relationships. So it seems quite detailed, but I think if we break it down this way and we look at it, we really get a good idea of how we can build this skill. We really can see, how can I be more adaptable? How can I be more flexible? How can I be more credible? How can I reflect more? All these things are behaviors that we can observe. We can think of ways of how to be a continuous improver, or how to empathize, or how to listen attentively. So we can see this skill of emotional intelligence. It's not all that mysterious. It's really behaviors that we know all about and that we can develop within ourselves. So I'm going to pose another question to you here. This is my last question. For coaching and leadership, how would you rank in the level of importance these three relationships? So the first one is intra, the second one is inter, and the third one is environmental. So when you, and there's no correct answer here, but I'm always very interested in people's experiences and what people kind of would say about, from what they've learned and from what they know about themselves, how these three relationships are ranked. Any comments on this?
Martin says he believes it all starts with self.
Okay. Martin and Socrates would agree.
Mm-hmm.
What are other people's experiences?
I would tend to agree as well that Dolores agrees with Martin too, that it has to start from within.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I mean, it must be difficult to build those interpersonal relationships without having that confidence, that trust in yourself, the credibility, feeling credible yourself.
Absolutely.
And the same with the environment.
Yeah.
So you had a bit of a slip of the tongue.
Oh, good. What happened?
Well, I just when we
Did I
were
make
talking,
a Freudian slip?
Well, no, it was a good one actually, or it brought up a question for me. It was about interpersonal relationships, and the behavior was listening attentively,
Yeah.
and you said intentively, and I thought, well, that's a good point as well. Listening with intention.
Yes.
As well as listening attentively, although it can be, if you're listening with the wrong intention, that's not good either. You're trying to interpret what or guess, think ahead to what the other person is going to answer, perhaps.
Or how am I going to respond to this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
but if your intention is to really understand, then absolutely listening with intention is very important in attentive listening. Yeah. Because you can listen with great focus with absolutely no intention whatsoever and not achieve anything. It can just, that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the Leafs will win tonight. You know how your mind kind of wanders around to, so intention is absolutely a very important part of attentive listening.
The other question that came up for me was in the environmental tier, where, like, you talk about flexibility and agility and adaptability. Is resilience part of that as well, or is that something separate?
I would say definitely that resilience is part of that. And I think you have to be as resilient to be adaptable. If you have no resilience, the amount of disappointment and setbacks and all those kinds of things that you experience in trying to achieve anything or change anything or move ahead in something is impossible if you're not extremely resilient. So I would put it as part of adaptability in the long run and flexibility also in the short run when you have to recover quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you might have, let a goal in if you're a goalie, or you might have had a poor shot in a curling thing.
Yep.
You have to be...
Just an open hit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You have to be extremely flexible and resilient to just move on. Let it go. It's gone. On to the next. Yeah. So it's absolutely essential. Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful that we have the opportunity, if we're able to learn these skills, that we have the ability or potential to pass this along to the athletes that we're working with? Like, it's kind of awesome. Like, it's
because it makes them better athletes, but it also makes them better people, and it makes them enjoy and be way more responsible if they're extremely self-knowledge and self-management. If they're really enjoying their teammates and their coaches and the whole environment, and if they're adaptable and flexible, they've got to be way more likely to be successful. I mean, I don't know how you could really give performance on demand at any level without really working on your emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? The mics are open, so if you'd like to...
So sorry, Andrea, let me... This is just for further reading. I don't know, I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with this publication they have both a daily email, which comes out and gives a lot of information about what's going on, particularly in the high performance area in all the sports in Canada. But they also do a sort of a monthly magazine. And in October 2018, one of the articles they had was developing executive functioning and emotional learning, social and emotional learning skills through sport. So executive functioning really means leadership. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting article. If people want to kind of read a little bit more on this and see how this particular author applied it to sport, it's a good article.
Excellent.
And before I open the mic, I'd just like to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. And also when we're thinking about skills that we want to achieve, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And it's really within us where we have the power and the desire and the determination and all those things to pursue some of these new skills and learnings. Open for discussion and questions.
All right. Here's the bridge. Okay.
Here's the bridge. From me to you.
That's right. Tell us what's on your mind out there, please. Some thoughts. It doesn't have to be a question. Just maybe some of your experiences. Yeah. Anybody? I'm hearing crickets, and it's not the alert on my text. Well, I thank you so much, Leith. This is
my pleasure.
Has been so informative because it's something we all have heard about, but maybe haven't delved into as much as we should have. And as coaches, it's like you said, our job is to train athletes, but we're not just training the sports-specific skills in athletes. We're training people. We're developing human beings. So this is absolutely food for thought. I do appreciate it.
Super duper, and thank you, Andrea, and thank you, coaches, for joining us tonight. And one of my greatest pleasures and real wishes is to make coaching easier for coaches, because I think it's such an important, valuable profession and contribution. And if there are ways that can be more fun and easier and more effective, I really would like to find ways to share that because it's just so necessary. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you. We have one final comment. Martin, he does subscribe to Circuit, and it's a great place to go mining for tools for leading change to include navigating the obstacles we often find while coaching and growing our coach toolbox. So
perfect.
That's great. Yep. And thank you. Martin also says thank you again for your pivotal role in his professional coach development and mine as well, Leith. One of the best experiences of my life.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you all. And I can tell you, it's sheer joy for me.
Oh, that's super. So I'm going to stop the recording shortly, but I will be sending the recording out to everybody. So please watch for it. It may not arrive tomorrow, but it'll come before the end of the weekend. Thank you all for participating, and watch for future webinars.